Let's begin, shall we? What a beautiful day. And thank you for letting me take the time to welcome everybody and to settle in. It is such a wonderful way to slow down, to really enter into this beautiful practice. So, with that, let's begin. Welcome, everyone. This is Recovery Dharma. My name is Julia. I'm one of the facilitators in the Spokane Sangha. And I'd like to begin our practice today by setting our intention. So much of the Buddhist practice is reflecting on one's motivation, reflecting on your intentions. Why are you here practicing? Why are you called to recover? What is motivating you to examine your relationship to habit energy, to rework the constraints around negative habit energy? And this is just simply a more mature way of approaching behaviors that no longer serve us, that cause harm to ourselves and others. And it's a way of looking deeply with wisdom and with care, as opposed to a very typical response of, you just shouldn't do that. Shouldn'ts, shoulds, should nots are not very motivating. So we have to go beyond that a little bit and really ask ourselves, what is motivating my action here today? What is the intention behind my effort? And can both of those things assume a posture of care and kindness, maybe even compassion? We begin with this beautiful sentiment of loving kindness, and it reads, "May you be light in dark spaces. May you be light in dark spaces." On Wednesdays, we slowly explore this wonderful book called Standing at the Edge by Roshi Joan Halifax. And Roshi has been teaching us all about something she calls edge states. And these are places of actual growth. An edge state is the place where we see our most intellectual, spiritual, emotional growth. And the edge state can be a bit precarious because when we go over the edge and we over engage in some quality, in something, we usually experience some kind of distress, some kind of negativity. Likewise, when we are a little too anxious, a little too nervous, a little too cautious, and we don't get close enough to that edge, we don't challenge ourselves, we become complacent and apathetic, we stagnate and we don't grow. So this edge state is this really fluid and flowing place that we're constantly invited to explore. When we left off 3 weeks ago, we were talking about the cultivation of universal compassion. Compassion is one of the 4 limitless qualities that we cultivate in Buddhism. The other 3 include loving kindness, joy, and equanimity. Universal compassion is the compassion that we are invited to explore that is without bias, without limit, and almost without rationale. It arises within us, and we find ourselves acting in ways that sometimes surprise us. Today, I'm going to read for you from this book, and it's actually a Buddhist parable, and it's called Asanga and the Red Dog. And it's a pretty common story. You'll hear it a number of times as a teaching, as a really intense example of universal compassion. And I want to just give you a little bit of forewarning. There's an element of grossness involved in this. So if you feel your butt cheeks tighten and clench, just a wonderful opportunity to practice, right? Just mindful breathing. Relax the butt cheeks. And with that, let's begin. Asanga and the Red Dog. Roshi writes, I asked myself some months ago what allowed universal compassion as an experience to come forward. A story from the Tibetan Buddhism gives me a hint as to how we can nourish universal compassion. The 4th century yogi Asanga spent many years meditating in a cave. He meditated on Maitreya, the Buddha of loving kindness. He meditated on Maitreya, hoping to receive a vision and a teaching from this Buddha. And even though Asanga practiced year after year after year, Maitreya never showed up. One day, after 12 years of sitting in his cave practicing and waiting for Maitreya to appear, Asanga decided that he'd had enough of cave time. And with his staff in hand, he left his hermitage and began to make his way down the mountain path. As he proceeded along the narrow way, he caught a glimpse of something ahead that seemed to be lying across the narrow path. Drawing closer, he saw a red dog lying still in the pale dust. Looking more closely, he found that the dog's hindquarters were covered with raw, red, angry, ugly sores. On closer examination, he discovered that the sores were filled with wriggling maggots. Asanga immediately wanted to help the dog, but he did not want to harm the maggots in the process. His compassion was so overpowering that he dropped to his knees and stuck out his tongue in order to gently remove the maggots without harming them. Before his tongue touched the mass of squirming larvae, the red dog transformed into compassionate Maitreya, the Buddha of compassion. Why, you may wonder, didn't Maitreya show up for Asanga in his cave? Why now? Roshi writes, I think that Maitreya would only come when Asanga was called into action, into the service of another. And I'm also sure that Asanga's 12 years of cave practice were not wasted. Even though Maitreya did not show up for him there, at least not in a form he could recognize, for Asanga's openness and compassion had grown deep and wondrous through his years of commitment and dedicated practice. Practice here yielded the golden fruit of undivided, unbiased compassion. Still, his compassion needed a reason to be activated, and the red dog, with all of its maggots, gave Asanga the opportunity to practice compassion both with and without an object. This speaks to the profound value of our relationship, and that our own liberation is bound up with the liberation of others. This story also points to the value of making our aspiration to benefit others an integral part of our practice, even if we are far from those who need help. And it reminds us that being with suffering is a path of practice that is energized by this deep, profound aspiration. The journey to recover our true selves, our Buddha nature, from the conflicted and afflicted mind states of negative habit energy is to be with suffering. The suffering of craving, the suffering of anxiety, boredom, self-harm, harm to others, lying, the suffering of sacrifice, the suffering of delusion. To be with any of that or all of that is an extraordinary act of compassion toward oneself. And when we practice just a little bit of this, just this simple act of compassion toward ourselves, we begin to grow in universal compassion for others. Would it mean that this would translate into your ability or my ability to try to lick maggots out of a dog? For me, that is a very quick and clear hell no. Not on your life. And that's okay. My universal compassion needs to be expressed some other way. The point is that we all have the capacity for it, but we can't get there without practice. We can't get there without an aspiration, all of which we have expressed by being here today. And so the invitation for the next couple of moments is to reflect on the compassion that you are offering yourself today by coming into this Recovery Dharma meeting, by participating in Sangha community, by hearing these words, and even if these words land in your mind today as hokey, as a little too kumbaya, maybe your inner cynic is really activated today, simply being with that is an act of compassion. Because it enables you to better be with other cynics in the world. To understand our own suffering is to understand the suffering of others. To offer compassion to ourselves is to liberate compassion for others. So we'll practice quietly by just allowing a couple of mantras to settle into the mind, to maybe soften and open the heart, beginning with our intention for this practice, which is, may I be light in dark spaces. May all beings everywhere have ease and safety. May all beings experiencing harm find care. May my understanding grow regarding my relationship to my own habit energy. Take a moment, look deeply, Sense the spirit of Maitreya. Compassion for yourself. Friends, as we take a step toward the conclusion of this meditation today, I'd like to leave you with a thought to carry into your practice, and that is compassion is often misinterpreted as excuses and even offering ourselves a little more leniency than perhaps we deserve. And the way to test whether or not you're making excuses for yourself and sort of dressing it up as compassion is when you see the behavior, a similar behavior in someone else, and you're very quick to anger, to judgment, to frustration. You let yourself off the hook easily, but you don't let someone else off the hook for doing the same thing. And this is a very human thing to do, and it's worth laughing at ourselves about and lightening up, because it just lets us know where our compassion is a little bit like Swiss cheese. It's got some holes in it, right? So I'll give you an example. When Lo and I were in Ireland, the steering wheel is on the right side of the vehicle, and you drive on the opposite side of the road as well. So driving was really challenging, and Lo was so wonderful to help me. Every time we got in the car, it was like left lane, left lane, left lane. And I needed it every time because, of course, I made a couple of mistakes. And I was so compassionate. I was like, oh, well, I'm a new driver. It's Ireland. I've never done this before. But after about 2 weeks, and I was getting confident and building up some skill, holy moly, the minute someone else was driving incorrectly, I was all over them. What's the matter with them? Why can't they learn how to drive? Holy Moses. And yet conveniently I had forgotten that just 2 weeks before that I'd done the exact same thing. If I'm going to offer myself compassion, I have to offer it to others as well. And when we can offer others compassion, it also informs us of where we're unable to do that for ourselves. So compassion as an action and as an exercise is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to explore and to examine. And there's lots and lots of examples that pop up in everyday life, including driving. So let's all take a collective deep breath together and maybe allow a smile to come upon our faces as we inhale. Inhale deeply. And just exhale and sigh it out. Alrighty, friends, with that, let's go ahead and end our practice with a dedication of merit. One of the things the Buddha teaches us is that the nature of reality is bound to encounter discomfort, frustration, bewilderment, suffering. When we're in the middle of it, we're despairing, we're grieving, we're upended, uprooted even. It's hard to feel okay. It's hard to feel like it's an opportunity for something good. More than likely, it feels like something you have to get through. So we come back to the practice, to the end of the practice, and we are asked to remember that anytime we come into breathing, anytime we come into the present moment, anytime we come into the slightest awareness of suffering, we are gaining access to merit, to positivity, to healing. And anytime we do that, we create a ripple in the fabric of life. May your efforts here today ring true and good. May our efforts here today ripple out into the world and find anyone who is in darkness, abandoned, alone, cold. May our efforts here today find them, wrap them up with affection and joy and love. May the interdependence and interconnectedness of this practice bring light and tenderness, gentleness and ease to all beings everywhere. Thank you so much for your beautiful practice, friends. We'll see you next time. Namaste.